Welcome to Office Hours by Triple X Church. I'm your host, Carl Thomas. I'm a pastor, certified neurohealth coach, and a guy who frankly struggled with a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about for nearly 20 years until I found freedom about a decade ago. In today's episode, we are going to be jumping in and answering this question. My son was exposed to porn at a young age. How do I help him return to purity? That's what I will be discussing today, so make sure you hang in there with me. Recognize that no questions are off the table, and I'm going to be as honest with my answers as I possibly can be, so don't get offended. So without any further delay, let's jump in. Okay, so this question came into our office hours page, and it's from a parent. She wrote, my son, now 13, at 10, was exposed to porn by another boy while outside playing. This incident has caused him much trauma and to basically caused him to also suffer a ton of shame. He has struggled with porn and shame since that event, and I have looked for help from the church but can find none. How can you help me help my son return to purity? So, listen, first of all, I don't know if this is going to make you feel better or worse, hopefully better, but what you're dealing with is not uncommon at all, okay? Unfortunately, most kids get exposed to porn at a young age. That is something that as parents, we have to understand and accept. Not saying we have to like it, but we can't live in a fantasy world where we think, oh, maybe I can keep my kid from seeing porn until he's 20 some years old. It's not going to happen. Has nothing to do with us necessarily, but just the world we live in. Kids are kids, and especially boys, young boys tend to like boobs, so they're going to show their friends pictures of that, whether their friends want to see it or not. All right. And I have these conversations with my son all the time. So anyway, that's just want to let you know, you didn't do anything wrong necessarily here. It's just the way this world works sometimes, which leads me to, this is why as parents, we need to understand that these things are going to happen. Okay. And as parents, we need to be proactive in talking to our kids at a much younger age than we might feel comfortable. So a lot of parents say, well, I'll wait till my kid's 13, 14. Listen, too late. All right. You need to start talking to kids about sex and porn and masturbation and all these things at a much, much younger age. I talk about this a lot in my book that's coming out in a few weeks called When Shame Gets Real. Definitely got to start those conversations early because stuff like this is going to happen. And yes, when a boy or a girl is exposed to porn for the first time, they are most likely going to be traumatized to some degree. And yes, they are probably going to experience some degree of shame because something in the back of their mind says, hey, this doesn't feel right. Now, if they come from a religious background, okay, where maybe sex is never talked about or sex is talked about in kind of a dirty or, shameful way, then the shame is compounded that much more. It's even worse, right? Because now they see this and they say, oh my gosh, my parents told me, don't ever look at this stuff, or there's something wrong with me. So I guess there's something wrong with me, right? So we have to be careful how we talk to our kids at a young age and set them up for success. All right. So I know it's kind of late for this one, but it's yes. And I mean, it's kind of late in terms of a proactive approach, but it's still the same approach I would take with your son, which is you need to have an honest talk with him about sex. Why does God give us sex? What's the nature of sex, the beauty of sex? And you need to make him aware that, yeah, there's things out there like porn that portrays sex in a way it wasn't meant to be portrayed. And that when he sees it, it doesn't make him a bad kid or a perverted kid or anything like that. It's just something that might happen. And when it happens, the best thing he can do is come tell you or his dad or both of you, whatever. That's the best thing you can do. Hey, we need to talk about it because you shouldn't see it, but you'll probably see it. And when you see it, we need to talk about it. And that's the exact conversation I've had with my son. Is I told him years ago, I said, listen, buddy, you're probably going to see porn. And he looked shocked. And I said, yep. And when you do, I don't want you to feel bad. Okay. You didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Okay. This is the reality of life. But when you do, please come talk to me because I want to talk you through it. And then he thankfully that didn't happen. I've talked to him before all these things have happened about porn, about masturbation, about all of that. But I've had the opportunity to explain to him why these things aren't healthy and why they're not good and how they impact a young brain, especially, and how our brains bond, right, to these things that give us pleasure. And then what happens is as we grow up, our brains start going to it more and more often because it just makes sense. Hey, I'm having a bad day. I think I'll go look at porn. Hey, my parents yelled at me. I feel like they don't really love me as much as I thought they did. I need to go look at porn. All these things, right? And so we need to, our kids are a whole lot smarter, to be honest, than we sometimes give them credit for. Some of the concepts I've explained to my son, I was a little worried about at first, especially when we get into the brain health stuff. Like, oh, I hope he gets this. I hope it doesn't go over his head. And then ask him questions afterwards. And he got it crystal clear. He understood. Now, sometimes, of course, you can't just explain it in a very clinical way. You have to give him examples that his young mind's going to be able to wrap around, but you can still give him the content he needs to hear to let him appreciate why this stuff is not healthy for him. Okay. Now, that being said, all this, how do I help him return to purity? First of all, let's get rid of that word. Okay. How do I help him return to purity? Okay. When we talk to our kids about being pure, and again, that can also it can also invite a ton of shame, right? Because the idea, I'm not saying purity is a bad word, but the way we've tend to throw it around, especially in the church world, it has this really high degree of expectations when it comes to our behavior. And think about it, purity is pure. In other words, no blemish, no spot, no anything. It's perfection, right? So if we mess up, we're no longer pure. That's how we tend to think. And that's very shameful, especially for a young child who, quite honestly, probably didn't really do anything purposefully wrong. They just stumbled upon it one way or the other. So just get rid of that word, especially when you're dealing with kids, and just say, hey, this isn't healthy. Same thing with sinful. Oh, that's sinful. It may be sinful. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But at 10 or 8, chances are they didn't do this stuff because they're trying to commit a sin against God. They did it because, in your case, someone showed your son this stuff. Maybe they stumbled upon it because we weren't as proactive as we should have been with our internet access for our kids. Whatever the reason, a lot of time, most of the time, it's a matter of accident, innocence, or curiosity. So throw out the word sinful and purity and talk to them about healthy and what's best for them, and try to explain things in that regard. And hopefully you're dealing with them at a young enough age where their brain hasn't developed a pattern. Now, it sounds like you said he's still looking at it, so he does have a sort of pattern. Hopefully you can start working with him to get him to stop looking at it. And yes, you can use safeguards and filters and things like that to kind of help your process. But ultimately, what we need to do is find out why he keeps going to it. And, chances are it's because it gives him some sort of pleasure and he's using it to get his mind off of things when things aren't good. And we need to get to that. Hey, why are you going to this? What's the problem? What is, when you look at this stuff, what's the main reason you're looking at it? Maybe you get a child counselor involved. That's not the worst thing in the world. Probably should look at getting a book or two. Jay Stringer's book, Unwanted, is very good. Might be a little over his head, I'm not sure, but it's very good. At least you could read it and then try to explain it to him, or it might help you get your mind wrapped around these things. Again, my book, When Shame Gets Real, I think that's something you should pick up, and it's something you might be able to share with your child, or at least the ideas and concepts in there. And you can work through it, all right? You definitely can, but you got to have patience, and you got to understand that you're working against a couple things here, right? You're working with youth and curiosity and sex drive to a degree, but you're also maybe working with some emotional pain and shame and things like that that are causing him to go that stuff in the first place, right? And you got to work through that in order to help him. So hope that helps. I know it's not a magic bullet solution. Unfortunately, these things are never solved with a magic bullet, but it gets you in the right direction. And again, stay away from shame and sin and all this stuff, and try to talk to them in a, hey, this is not a healthy thing. I want the best for you, not this. This is not the best for you. All right. And also, side note, please don't give him the book, Every Young Man's Battle. That'll just scar him. Okay. So that's just a little side note there. Anyway, that's it. If you have a question for us, go to xxchurch.com/office-hours and submit yours, and I will answer it in one of our upcoming episodes. Thank you and have a great week.